Cloaktech here with lesson 2 of the Java programming section of my channel. So we're basically just going to pick up where we left off. We talked about variables and printing, so now we have our original statement here. Hello Cloaktech, I love your tutorials being printed. And basically what we're going to talk about now is what's called a for loop. A for loop is a structure that basically does exactly kind of what it sounds like it does. It loops through a set of instructions a specified number of times and can do special things. So say for some odd reason printing this one time wasn't enough. Well, we can set up a for loop to print it as many times as we would like. So let's start off with saying you say for and then parentheses, and for loop has 3 different sections inside the parentheses. Now there's a couple different ways to do for loops, but the most efficient is to put them all in one line and have the 3 different sections. So it's going to be the first section is the integer that is what's called the counter variable, and I always call it int I, and then you start it at 0. And what int I does is keeps track of the number of times you've gone through the loop. So once int I has reached a certain number, the loop will stop. So say we want to go through the loop 5 times. We want to say that's what the second section is for, setting your limit on the loop. So I'm going to say I greater than or equal to 5. Now what that'll do is basically make the loop happen 5 times. Now let me explain that. While I this is basically saying while I is less than or equal to 5. And I might have said greater than earlier, I don't remember. I think I did. But it's less than or equal to 5. So now right here we're going to say I plus plus, and what that does is it's called an incrementation. And an incrementation, every time it passes through the loop, it'll come down, loop and loop and loop, and every time it comes back up to here, I will be added 1 to. That's what plus plus does. It's the same thing as doing I now equals I plus 1. So say so let's this is kind of like what I like to do with loops to explain to people. You kind of walk through the loop. So I'm going to use my mouse right here. It's a lot easier. So right here, so the computer will read for I blah blah blah. It doesn't really care about that right now, and it'll start going to the next instruction inside the loop. So it sees to print these 2 things, and it does that. And since it's in a loop, see, I got the ending bracket right here. This ends the loop. Since it's in a loop, it sees this and goes back up to the top. Now it says for int I, and I used to equal 0. Now it equals 1 because I was added to. So they added 1 to I, and I is still less than or equal to 5, so it'll do the loop again, and it'll come back up I equals 1, but now I equals 2 because we added 1 to I, and since I is still, since 2 is still less than or equal to 5, it'll go to the loop again, and it'll complete that pattern until it does the specified number you kind of put right here. Now since I'm starting at 0, I believe this will print it 6 times. Hold on, we messed up a little bit. Yep, forgot a parentheses. Now, what am I doing here? Sorry about that. So, basically, to count how many times it prints, it'll be easier to see. You put a little system.out.println, and you put an empty string right here. Compile that, run it, and you'll see this is printed a certain number of times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, just like I thought it would. So that's how you use a loop. And now the for loops can be used for like a ton of different things. Mainly you're going to use for loops when we get to arrays, and arrays are pretty simple. It's like an integer. It's like a variable that stores a bunch of variables, if that makes sense. And for loops are really useful when it comes to arrays. But that's for loops for right now. Now let's move on to what is another big player in the Java programming, is a if statement. Now say while this for loop is incrementing, every other time it prints, it's gonna print. Let's say, how about it prints? What should it say? How about it'll print like a bunch of stars or something. So you would say, you come up here and you'd say if I is the incrementation variable. So if I modulus 2 equals 0, that'll make it so every even increment prints a star. Modulus is a little function for those of you who don't know, who kind of like, basically it's going to divide I by 2 and take the remainder of that. So if I is 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1, so there's no remainder. So modulus is just like the remainder function. So if there's an odd number modded by 2, it's always going to leave the number 1. So let's move this back up. Now so basically on the even increments of this if statement, we are going to print the regular thing now. So that means on the odd increments, your else factor, this basically just means, so if this I is an odd number, so if it's modded by 2 does not equal 0, this is where the else comes in, and you can say system.out.println, and then do a bunch of stars, because I don't know why, but just an example. Now you're going to close off your else, make sure your for loop is closed, close the main method, close the class. Alright, compile this, should compile, I don't think I messed up. And as you can see, every other statement, instead of, here, let's clean it up, it'll print, it does work, it prints the stars every other statement, but let's print a space just so it looks a little cleaner. System.out.println empty space. Compile, run, and now it still prints 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But now every other one is the star thing. And just so you know, you can change this less than or equal, I less than or equals, you can put 20. And that'll be annoyingly a lot of prints, but it'll print 20 times, as it just did. I'm seeing, you can scroll through here. So that's what loops do. For loops do a lot of things. This is just one example of for loops and if statements. So this was lesson 2. Comment, rate, subscribe, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you in lesson 3. Thanks.